Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to In the Fighting Chair. This is a live stream interview series uh, presented by Living Sharks Museum. I am Keith Cowley. I'm the curator of Living Sharks Museum. I am honored today to be able to have another amazing guest on In the Fighting Chair. Today we have the author of Emperors of the Deep, Mr. William McKeever. This show it's been a long time in the making. I have been wanting to do this for a long time. And given the current scenario where most folks are stuck at home, we've decided to try this interview series as a live stream. And I want to thank you all for supporting that. This has been a great time so far. We've got quite a few other awesome guests lined up. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about sharks, shark conservation, and some of the things we might be able to do to protect them. And without further ado, I'd like to bring in William McKeever.
Hey, Keith.
Hello there. How are you?
Yeah. Great to be on your show. Thank you very much. I was at your museum last year and I loved it. It was fascinating. I don't know how you found all this stuff. Some of the things going back, the original shark protection gear and the World War II. It was great. It's great stuff.
Thank you. It's been an interesting journey, trying to piece all the pieces of shark history together in one cohesive exhibition. It's definitely been a challenge.
Yeah. Well, it's been great.
I'm sure
it's a great idea. No one else has done it, and it's so hard in this world to come up with something that's unique that hasn't been tried before. So kudos for you for doing it. It's really, really entertaining and different.
Well, thank you very much. My ultimate goal here is to utilize this as sort of a soapbox to be able to talk about shark issues of the past and today. So, of course, that's definitely why we've asked you to come along, because you can speak personally from that. I've enjoyed your book, and I share it to a lot of folks. Some of the folks in the marine science community that I know have read this have said wonderful things as well. So you should be proud about the package you've put together. Where are you from, Bill?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you usually don't think of ocean in Pittsburgh, but I grew up in a household where my parents, particularly my dad, was a big fisherman, loved the ocean, and so every summer we would take a vacation and we would go to as we call it, the Jersey Shore, and I remember as a young kid swimming there. I just fell in love with the ocean as a kid. And then as time went on, we'd go to other places. We ended up going up to the Cape and the islands. And that's where I fell in love with the ocean. And it started a lifelong love affair. I ultimately finished my schooling and I came to New York. And so even though I'm living in the city now, I continue to take advantage of the ocean, all the great places around here, Long Island, and of course there are sharks everywhere. So I was constantly running into them and creating. It was really just my love for the ocean has just continued my whole life.
Because you were working in Wall Street, is that true?
That's right. I was working on Wall Street as a healthcare analyst, and what got me was I was out in Montauk one fine weekend, nice and sunny, and I saw a commotion going on, and I went over and I had stumbled on a shark tournament, and that was something that I had never heard of before. And for some of your listeners may know what that is, but for others that don't, a shark tournament is where fishermen will go out to catch the biggest shark. And they have awards if you catch the biggest mako or the biggest blue shark. And what shocked me was that here were these magnificent animals that had been taken back to the dock, weighed, and then they were literally thrown into the garbage. they've been chopped up, and I just thought, what crime have these animals committed? So it got me so angry that I decided to get involved and did some investigating into these shark tournaments, and that got me down the road of learning about sharks. And the short of it is that it changed my life. I have now become a shark advocate, a conservationist. This is now a full-time job. I left my job, happily so, to do this. And I can't think of anything more important than this. Our oceans are so valuable to our very existence, and sharks sit as apex predators, and they are crucial to maintaining that health of the ocean. So I see the two going hand in hand, and as I said, being involved in it every day, I am energized to lead the crusade to help protect our oceans.
Well, thank you for your mission. There are a lot of folks out there with a similar mission who've come from all different varied backgrounds. And I just want to put this out there to the public and those that are watching. Don't feel like you can't chase your passion just because other folks are out there doing it. Don't let anybody tell you you can't as well. And because it's all good data, and personal experience is very meaningful. And I'm glad you put it all down on paper and soon on video.
Yeah, yeah, Keith.
So,
I was just going to add to that, Keith. I think that's a great point. That people can get involved. There's so much that has to happen out there in terms of education, action, regulations. If somebody is interested in this, my advice: go for it. There's a huge need. You don't have to start your own organization. You can start off working with, there's so many organizations out there that need help, that want people who are energized. Then you can always do something on your own if you want, but please get involved. It boils down to individuals getting actually mad and looking what's happening and doing something about it. And we've seen in other cases where citizen scientists and individuals have ended up making some big changes out there.
Absolutely. If we can influence people with the arts and media, we definitely can get our word across. Obviously, the fear of sharks has gripped most people, even folks that have never encountered a shark or even put themselves in a scenario to encounter a shark. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I look back on, my experience with sharks, when I'd go fishing as a kid with my dad, we'd see some sharks now and then and didn't think anything of it. Obviously, I respected them as apex predators. But what really changed things was the movie Jaws when that came out. That changed everybody's perception. The great white was perceived as a man-eater. And it's really quite tragic what happened. And it's fascinating that Peter Benchley, who obviously is the author of Jaws, and he sold 20 million books, by the way, he realized that he had made a huge mistake. And the epiphany for him was he was actually scuba diving in Costa Rica, and he stumbled on an underwater scene where these sharks had been finned. Their bodies had been thrown overboard, and they sunk to the bottom where they died. And there's just carpet of dead sharks. And he realized that people just didn't care what happened to sharks. So he spent the rest of his life trying to undo what he had done in the book Jaws, and to show that this myth of sharks as man-eaters, as dangerous, is something that we have to be worried about as being utter nonsense. And he worked very hard, and sadly had an untimely death due to a rare disease. But his wife, Wendy Benchley, continues to this day to try to change that opinion on sharks that he created.
She's done tremendous work and definitely brought awareness to the issues, especially the finning issues that she's done with Wild Aid. Very impressive. And that's just another example of the power of the media. When you get the right message out there, you get some real change. Jaws was a huge inspiration for me. So, of course, there was fear in my youth. Sharks are intriguing creatures with sharp teeth, and a lot of folks, who never encounter sharks never really get to see anything other than the images of these animals with their mouths wide open and teeth showing and feeding and leaping from the ocean. Not really being able to see some of these other behaviors. So this is an amazing time period where we're finally actually able to see new visuals of sharks, see new behaviors in their natural environment. More and more people are getting into the water, and that's an amazing thing. And when did you first start diving?
Yeah, so I started diving. I think that my dad wanted me to do it, so I was 12 years old. The tank at that point was big. I went over the side. The tank pulled me down. But anyway, that started really a lifelong love affair with the ocean. And after that, we were talking about with Jaws, when that came out, whenever I would come across a shark while I was diving, I was a little unnerved by it. And now that I've gone through this process of doing the research and diving with sharks, I have come to the conclusion that those fears that I have were completely ungrounded. So now when I get into the ocean and go scuba diving, it's a whole another world. It's so exciting, and it really is good for the soul to go down there and see this other world. It's an underwater cathedral, in my opinion.
But as an adult and then later in life, you decided to pick this up again. And embrace your love for the ocean and for its creatures, specifically the sharks, and embark on a journey. When did this begin for you?
Yeah, well, it goes back to that shark tournament that I saw in Montauk. And after I saw those sharks dangling from yard arms and seeing them literally chopped up and thrown into a dumpster, I started a process of trying to understand the shark tournaments and trying to understand sharks. And I asked some very basic questions, and I thought, well, maybe sharks are something that we don't need, and maybe it's okay that they're hunted in shark tournaments. And so the first thing I found out about the shark tournaments was that these are entities that are ultimately very cruel and very wasteful. These sharks are held by they're in these fishing battles for an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're obviously stressed. They're fighting for their lives. These are smart animals, and they're being tortured in this for what? For entertainment, and for the shark tournaments. What's really going on, it's a gambling operation. The people who are out there catching the sharks have spiced their event up by having people bet on who's going to catch the biggest shark. So these tournaments will end up with prizes of tens of thousands of dollars. In some tournaments, I've heard of people walking away with $100,000, $200,000 in prize money. You can go out and have fun and go fishing, but to go out and do this where you're massacring a very important animal to the marine ecosystem, that to me makes absolutely no sense. And as I was doing the investigation, that's when I realized that sharks are not these crazed man-eaters. They are crucial to the marine ecosystem. And you do not want to be taking them out of the marine food pyramid for something like silly as a shark tournament.
There's a long, long history of shark fishing and shark tournaments. I suppose it goes back to the days of Zane Grey, Teddy Roosevelt, and this adventurous spirit that was somehow satiated by death, by the taking of these animals and preserving them as trophies. It it's a very sad affair, and we'd love to see that change. There's a lot of folks out there, a lot of organizations working towards making changes in the tournament industry. Of course, one of the only positives of the tournament industry is that we do get scientific data from these sharks that are taken now. Unfortunately, there's not a huge budget for the science going on there. It would be nice if there was, because as long as tournaments exist, we should be getting as much science from those sharks as we can. Otherwise, like you said, Bill, it's an extremely wasteful practice. In the Living Sharks Museum, of course, we showcase folks like Frank Mundus, who was the inspiration for the character Quint in Jaws. He was a very famous, legendary, if you will, shark fisherman. He killed thousands of sharks in his lifetime, and obviously was a major inspiration for that character, just for who he was. He caught the largest fish by rod and reel, almost 3,500 pounds, and it was a great white shark, before the time that white sharks were protected. So characters like this, we shouldn't be embracing them, but we can teach about them. We can learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, Keith, I just to add to that, and I think that's a great thing what you've got there, your museum, to have all that memorabilia going back. And the thing, when you mentioned Frank Mundus, he was quite a character, as you very well know, or better than me. I think he painted his toenails one red, one green, to show us how to get back to the dock, I guess. Anyway, he was another one like Peter Benchley, who at the end of his life realized that he had made a mistake. I don't know how many sharks he killed over his lifetime, hundreds, maybe thousands. But at the end, he realized that he had made a mistake in doing that. And I think people that spend time around these animals and understand them and get to know them realize how vital, how crucial they are, and what an utter waste it is to kill them for something, something silly as the term. What gets me is that people go on these tournaments and they'll think, I'm catching the big shark and I'm going to come back and, well, look what I did, honey. I spent my weekend, I got this big, nasty shark. And then people look at them and think, oh, well, were you scared? You were so brave to do that. The reality is that it's not all that exciting and dramatic to catch a shark. I'll never forget one conversation I had with somebody who was in a shark tournament, and he was talking about blue sharks. And they actually have a category in a tournament, largest blue. He said blue sharks should not even be in a category because they're so easy to catch. Blue sharks are scavengers. You put anything in the ocean in front of them, they're going to eat it. They'll eat cans that are floating in the water. They'll eat garbage. They'll eat anything. You throw a baited hook in front of them, of course they're going to bite it. Where's the challenge in catching a shark like a blue shark? There's none. So this myth of being a macho and catching a big bad shark and how virile I am is utter nonsense.
Well, it's also not a safe practice either. I mean, for a long time, people were catching sharks purely for the trophy aspect of that experience. But, over the years, eventually people started consuming these sharks, which is another problem. But at least the mako sharks and the thresher sharks were widely consumed. Though, of course, new data out there now is teaching us that they're high in heavy metals and mercury. So it's really not a healthy practice. But blue sharks in particular urinate through their skin. So consuming these sharks, catching these sharks for consumption is not a great idea either. So
yeah, that's a great point about the mercury. You look at any list of fish high in mercury, sharks are at the top of the list, right up there with tuna, swordfish. And, the recommendation is that actually you shouldn't eat these animals. Mercury is highly toxic. So, you catch a mako shark in a tournament, you're taking out a valuable apex predator, and then you're killing yourself by giving yourself mercury. It's one of these nonsensical situations.
So what was your first destination when you decided to pursue this book, Emperors of the Deep?
Yeah. So what I decided to do was the best thing was to go out and actually dive with one. And I had heard about the cage diving operations in South Africa, and there were a number of scientists out there that I wanted to interview. So I thought, well, I'll head there, and so I did the cage dive with a great white, which was a real thrill. I mean, what really an honor to be with a great white shark, literally 5 feet away from me. And I learned a great deal from that. Seeing them up close, I see just how beautiful they are, how magnificent this creature is. And the scientists that I talked to, what they were uncovering about them was remarkable. How far they travel. You know, there was one great white shark that was tagged in South Africa, and it went to Australia and back in a straight line. That's over 2,000 miles each way, and did it in something like 6 or 7 months. It's one of the most long journeys ever recorded, and they do this routinely. So I learned a great deal. That really started the journey for me, and as I said, I kept on going, and over 2 years, it was not all continuously, but over that period, I had really a great thrill in meeting other scientists and conservationists and diving with sharks, and yeah, I've got to say, I loved every second of it.
And that's a great example. Of course, in your book, you mentioned that these sharks are worth far more alive than dead. Shark tourism brings in a lot more money, maybe $100,000 to $300,000 a fish, you say.
Yeah, that's true. And I ultimately went down to Florida, went diving there. This statistic blew me away. In Florida, the shark diving industry generates over $200 million in revenues. Now you're going to weigh that industry versus killing sharks, where if you fin them and sell the fins, you get maybe I don't know, something like $30 a pound. Sharks are so valuable to a tourist operation, and a lot of countries around the world have figured that out. In Fiji, for example, they have a big shark dive operation. There even now dive operations that have opened up off of Rhode Island, off of Montauk. And what a great way to experience sharks and have it part of your vacation. That's a lot more fun. That makes a lot more sense than going out fishing for them. You get a real thrill seeing that great animal up close and knowing when you leave that shark is out there still.
You spent a little bit of time learning from Greenpeace as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned?
Yeah, so so I hooked up with Greenpeace, and they're obviously a great organization, and I was interested to learn about their ship, the Rainbow Warrior, and that ship goes around the world looking for abuses on the high seas. And the one thing that I wanted to understand was how many sharks were being killed out there on the high seas. How was it being done? And and I talk about this in the book. And they introduced me to the concept of long line fishing, where these boats will go out, they'll send a single line that is literally 100 miles long. Sometimes they're 150 miles long. And at regular intervals, they're baited hooks with thousands of hooks on this line. So they leave the line out there overnight, and they come back and they pull it in. Well, when you do that, you're going to an indiscriminate way of fishing. You're going to catch anything and everything. So they showed me on the Rainbow Warrior these vessels catching seabirds and turtles and of course sharks. And seabirds are being killed by hundreds of thousands a year. So it showed me the waste that's taking place with longline fishing. And more importantly, for sharks, there are 100 million sharks being killed every year around the world, mainly through these longline fishing operations that are out there trying to catch tuna. And a lot of those sharks that are killed out there, approximately 70 million of them, are ending up as fin soup. So in China, just a quick reminder for some people, going back hundreds of years, if you served Chinese shark fin soup, it was a sign of your wealth and your prestige. Actually, the emperors used to do that. And in this day and age, that's a cultural vestige that frankly needs to be completely discarded. And I think what we need to everyone needs to understand is that these actions that kill millions of sharks every year has to end to help to save our oceans.
Absolutely. So you've actually started your own nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit about Safeguard the Seas?
Yeah, so I started Safeguard the Seas as a nonprofit to help educate people about these issues that I mentioned in the book, about the longline fishing and the overexploitation. And mako sharks, as an example, are a species that has now been ranked as endangered. And yet they're allowed to be caught in shark tournaments right here where I live in New York City, right here in Montauk, which is 100 odd miles away. They're killing mako sharks, an endangered species, for entertainment. So that's what I wanted to do in Safeguard the Seas, raise these issues, educate people, and provide a forum to get this information out there.
That's excellent. Hopefully you can all see the address on the screen, safeguardtheseas.org. Definitely visit his site and learn a little bit about what he's doing. Of course, there's some links there for the book and the upcoming documentary. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I hear there is a documentary coming out soon. Can you tell us when we can see it?
Yeah, so it was research that I did when I looked at the shark tournaments. I filmed some of these shark tournaments to show people what really goes on at these operations. And so that kind of, again, led me down the road where I wanted to get more information and ended up building a full length documentary film. It's an hour and 20 minutes long. It's called Emperors of the Deep, same name as the book. And I just submitted the film late last year to film festivals. And I was actually scheduled to show next week at the Princeton Environmental Film Festival. My film, and obviously with the crisis, that got postponed, as well as my other showings coming up. So stay tuned. Once we get back to normal, hopefully sometime in the fall or late summer, I'll be showing the film, and I'll be showing that on my website when and where. And obviously I'm prejudiced, but I think it's a great film. I think you learn a lot about sharks and what's happening to them around the world. So in the meantime, the book is available, and I have a paperback coming out on May 26th. And I think that's a great place to start until the movie comes out.
Excellent. And for that book, you can go to emperorsofthedeep.com and find it there. It's also available on a lot of online sellers, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If the documentary is anything like the book, I'm certainly looking forward to it. Let's talk a little bit about your personal experience diving and experiencing sharks for the first time.
Yeah, so I personally ran the gamut, as I mentioned, after Jaws came out, being fearful and thinking about when I'm in the water, where are they? They must be out there somewhere. To really going in the opposite direction, to where, believe me, I respect sharks. They're not cute and cuddly and go up to and give them a hug, but at the same time, I think when you're in an environment where they can see you, clear visibility, that sharks are not crazed man-eaters. They are actually very cautious animals. Once they understand that you're not on the menu, after a while, they lose interest. Now, obviously, they're different species that you have to treat differently. There are over 500 species of sharks. Many of them are actually quite small. The cart shark, for example, the cat shark family, those sharks only get to be about 2 or 3 feet long, and they're harmless. Um, Many sharks are in what's the category that I would call the mesopredator level, sort of mid-level predators, something like a blacktip shark. And sand tigers are in that same category. Now, there are some sharks at the very high end, like a great white shark or a tiger shark, that are big and strong. And I think for those sharks, we have to be obviously knowledgeable, thoughtful about interacting with them, respectful, aware that this is their environment. We are interlopers, and we really need to get out of their way. This is where they live, and we bow to them. And I think when we bring in that kind of knowledge to sharks, that we can interact with them. For the major sharks like great whites, cage diving is certainly appropriate. I think sharks that are a little farther down on this chain, you can swim without feeling that they're out to get you, and have an interaction with the ocean that's very satisfying.
Well, we actually have a little bit of footage that you've provided us. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this experience.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up one now, if that's okay.
Yeah, please bring that up. So just by way of background, while you're doing that, so this is a shark dive operation in Florida, Jupiter Inlet, which is north of Palm Beach by about maybe just about 45-minute drive north. And Jupiter Inlet's a beautiful community. They have a marina, and they take people shark diving. They do cage diving, but they also do without cages. So I signed up for it. This was early, and this is warm water, and so you never know what sharks are going to show up. And what happened to show up that day were bullshit. I was in a cage, so I'll let you see this video. That is a bull shark, and there I am in the cage.
I have to say that's a very small cage.
Yeah, and I love that shot of the shark. You see how beautiful they are in the water, and bull sharks. They're big, strong sharks. They're beefy, and they are again can be aggressive. So when I had read all about that, and I was with a bull shark, I decided that the cage was the safest place to be. Now, in the next video, I started to think in this operation that I was on, they had a shark diver with us who was there just to be an escort, so to speak. Now, you can see he's out there without a cage. And I thought to myself, well, I'm in the cage. He's out of one. This is crazy. So I started to think, well, maybe I can get out of the cage. So I think that's the next clip coming up. So while you're pulling that one up, there were that day 3 bull sharks. A lot of people think that sharks like that are just totally loners. They actually there are many cases where they can sometimes travel with groups. It's a bit of a controversial statement to say this, but sharks have a life that we're just beginning to understand. The curtain's being pulled back, and they have a bit of a social life. And I talk in the book. I have a chapter devoted to the social. There's a wonderful scientist, Tristan Guttridge, at the University of Miami, who's done a lot of work on lemon sharks and their sociability. So anyway, I think if you got the clip, let's see that. So there I am in the cage, and I decided it was time to get out. And I'm looking around, and to my right, I see a bull shark pulling up. And I decided to retreat. There you see him coming up to the cage now. And so I decided to get back in the cage. But again, I saw these animals cautious. They kind of were looking at us, and then they would swim away. There wasn't any sign of aggressive behavior. So here I am out. They didn't rush me, and as I said, the assistant around and doing just fine. So then it was kind of like a kid taking baby steps. I'm in the cage, feeling comfortable, get out of the cage. So the next clip, and there's that shot of that. I love the silhouette of the bull shark. They're just so graceful and beautiful. So then I decided the time had come to get out of the cage, and at that point, I felt that I had overcome my fear of sharks. Not that, again, I respect them, and I'm always going to be cognizant I'm in their world, and I have to respond accordingly. But I felt that I reached a point where I didn't feel I had to be scared of them. And as you can see in the video, and we are probably about 3 miles out at sea. It's about 300 feet deep. So this is really a deep ocean. These sharks they're not hanging out at the beach. They're really in deep water doing their thing. And so you can see that bull shark is right underneath my cage. And as it continues to play out here, I got out. And it was really felt very free. And there's the bull shark, and there I am, and we are just looking at each other, and they would kind of come around and look at me, and then they would swim off, and I felt totally fine. So so for your listeners, that's I'm just sharing my experience going from the Jaws movie, being afraid of even swimming in the ocean, to where I'm free diving with bull sharks. Here's someone who take the information about sharks and realize that that myth out there is just wrong. So I'm on a mission to change it. And I hope this video will make people realize that that what they're taught in the media about these big dangerous sharks, and the music, the Jaws music playing in the background on Shark Week, it's really laughable that when they do that sort of thing. Now, when Shark Week does episodes where it's educational and we're learning about sharks, I think that's great, and I love when Shark Week does that. But when they make them out to be these Jaws-like creatures, that's when I have to say, time to change the channel and look at something a little more truthful.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your film. I guess with current events, it'll be pushed off for a little ways, but we'll be keeping an eye on your social media and on your websites to see when it's up and available to watch. I'm really grateful that we can go from this to this. It's a real treat, and I appreciate everything. Thank you, Bill, for visiting with us today. We're going to take a question that came up, if you don't mind, and see if you've got an answer for it. This is from Mark Berardi. He's asking us, are there any pending public policy initiatives to curb the number of shark tournaments taking place on the East Coast of the U.S.?
Yeah, Mark, thank you for the question. That's a good one. And sadly, there is, and that is something that I'm gonna focus on. So, with this crisis, we all have some extra time on our hands, and that's something that I'm going to be doing with Safeguard the Seas, is to getting organized to do something about this, because right now there is nothing pending. There is no. And again, we talked at the beginning of our talk about people who are out there looking to get involved, maybe do something. Ending shark tournaments, and they take place from Florida all the way up to Maine. That's a great place to start. And so I'm going to be doing things. Watch my website, Safeguard the Seas. I'm going to be adding some things about that, some activities. Sign up for if you go to WilliamMcKeever.com, you can sign up for the newsletter there. And follow me on Facebook and Twitter. It's William McKeever Official. And that's 2020. This is one of my big initiatives.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I look forward to your next visit to the museum. And let's talk again soon and hear how things are going.
Yeah, great. Keith, thank you for being on, and thank you for everything that you're doing with this museum and education. I think it's fabulous. It's great what you're doing. And as soon as they let us out of here in New York, I'm coming up. For New Yorkers are not very popular these days. I have everything, but I'm coming up to see you in Rhode Island. So I'll see you hopefully soon, man.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's our episode for today of In the Fighting Chair. Keep an eye out for our next events. We've got Dr. Greg Scommel on Monday. That's going to be a great interview. He's so charismatic and passionate about sharks. It's going to be a wonderful show. And we've got a big surprise coming on Friday. But keep an eye out on our social media for that one. Again, my name is Keith, curator here at Living Sharks Museum. You can utilize any of our resources on our website, livingsharks.org, and follow our social media for any other educational content while we're stuck at home during this time. And again, after all of that, I hope to see you soon here at the Living Sharks Museum. Have a great day.